The train rattled through the quiet night, its steady rhythm echoing like a distant heartbeat as it carried its few remaining passengers across the sleeping city. Inside the dim compartment, the lights flickered softly, casting long shadows over worn seats and tired faces. Among them, she stood out without trying, draped in a delicate silk dress that shimmered faintly with every movement of the train. She looked as though she belonged somewhere else, entirely some grand hall, filled with music, laughter, and crystal glasses, not here in this near-empty carriage. Her makeup, though slightly smudged, still held traces of elegance, and the faint scent of liquor lingered around her, subtle but unmistakable, telling the story of a long evening that had perhaps gone on too late. Now, she was asleep, her head resting against the cold window, her body gently swaying with each turn of the tracks. A loose strand of hair brushed against her cheek, and her breathing was slow and uneven, as if exhaustion had claimed her without warning. Across from her sat a man in simple clothes, his presence quiet and unassuming. At first, he had barely noticed her, but something about the contrast, the silk dress against the harsh train setting, the vulnerability in her posture, had drawn his attention back again and again. When the train slowed at the next station and a few passengers stepped off, he glanced at her more carefully. She didn't move. A slight frown crossed his face. He hesitated, unsure if he should interfere, knowing how the world often misjudged such intentions. Still, the thought of leaving her alone, unaware of where she might end up, felt wrong. Leaning forward slightly, he spoke in a low, cautious voice. "Miss, do you know where you need to get off?" She stirred just enough to murmur something incoherent, for words lost in the rumble of the train, before slipping back into unconsciousness. The man sat back, exhaling slowly as he looked around the nearly empty carriage. The night outside grew darker, the stations more deserted. After a moment of quiet conflict, he made up his mind. He adjusted his seat, keeping a respectful distance, but his eyes remained on her, not with curiosity, but with a silent promise. Tonight, he wouldn't just be another stranger passing through. He would stay, watch, and make sure that somehow, safely, she found her way home. The train rolled deeper into the night, each passing station quieter than the last, as if the city itself had begun to fade away. The once busy carriage was now nearly empty, leaving behind only the soft hum of the engine and the occasional metallic screech of wheels against the tracks. The man checked the route map above the door, his brow slightly furrowed. Most stops ahead were small, unfamiliar, and poorly lit. If she missed her station, there was no telling where she might end up. He glanced at her again. She hadn't moved much, only shifting slightly as the train swayed, her silk dress catching the dim light like a fading memory of a better evening. Up close, he could see the signs more clearly now. The exhaustion, the faint smell of liquor, the way her hand loosely clutched a small purse, as if it were the only thing grounding her. Another station approached. The train slowed with a long sigh. The doors opened, but no one entered. No one left either. Just silence. He leaned forward again, a little more firmly this time. "Miss, please wake up. You might miss your stop." She stirred, her lashes fluttering open. For a brief moment, her eyes met his, confused, distant, trying to make sense of where she was. I need to get home," she whispered, her voice fragile. "Where do you live?" he asked gently. She tried to respond, but her words tangled together. She fumbled with her purse, dropping it slightly before catching it again. He didn't reach out, didn't want to startle her, but he stayed ready in case she needed help. Finally, she managed to pull out her phone. The screen lit up her face, pale and tired. With shaky fingers, she opened something, maybe a map, maybe a message, and then simply handed the phone toward him, as if trusting him was easier than explaining. He hesitated for a second, then took it. The address was there, half-typed, but enough to understand it wasn't on this train line, not even close. He looked back at her. She had already drifted off again. The train doors beeped. Time was running out. Making a quick decision, he stood up. As the train came to a halt at the next station, he carefully picked up her small purse and gently spoke. "Miss, We need to get off here. She barely responded, her body heavy with sleep. With quiet determination, he guided her up, making sure she stayed steady without overstepping. Step by step, they moved toward the door. As they stepped onto the empty platform, the train behind them began to pull away, disappearing into the dark. Now, it was just the two of them, manned the long way home ahead. The station was almost deserted, bathed in pale white lights that flickered softly against the empty platform. The train had already disappeared into the distance, leaving behind a heavy silence, broken only by the faint rustle of wind. She stood beside him, barely steady on her feet, her silk dress shifting gently as she swayed. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world had paused. Just the two of them, in a place that didn't belong to either. P looked around, then back at her.
"Can you walk?"
he asked quietly. She nodded faintly, though her steps told a different story. Without making it obvious, he positioned himself close enough to catch her if she stumbled, careful to keep his distance, respectful. Together, they moved toward the station exit, her hand lightly brushing the wall for balance. Outside, the night air was cooler, fresher. It seemed to wake her just a little. He checked her phone again, confirming the address. It was still a fair distance, a wait too far to walk, especially like this. Spotting a taxi stand across the road, he guided her there slowly. A single cab waited under a dim streetlight. The driver, half asleep behind the wheel. Yeah, address Yana High, he said, showing the phone. The driver nodded. He opened the back door and turned to her. "You'll be home soon," he said gently. She looked at him, then really looked this time. Her eyes, though tired, held a quiet softness, as if she was trying to understand why a stranger had stayed. "You didn't have to," she murmured. He gave a small, almost shy smile. "I know." For a second, neither spoke. The world felt still again, but lighter somehow. She reached into her purse, fumbling slightly, perhaps trying to offer money or say thank you in a more tangible way. He shook his head softly. "It's okay. Just get home safe." There was something in his voice, simple, sincere, that made her stop. She nodded instead, her expression gentler now. "Thank you," she whispered. He helped her into the cab, closing the door carefully. As the taxi engine started, he stepped back onto the quiet street, watching as the car slowly drove away, its red taillights fading into the darkness. For a long moment, he stood there. Then, with a quiet breath, he turned and began walking back toward the empty station. Just another stranger, again, in a city that would never know what he had done. But somewhere, in a warm home not too far away, a girl in a silk dress would wake up safe because he chose to care.